Welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast. My name is Anthony Oliver, and today we're going to focus on how technology is set to, well, perhaps is already transforming the delivery and operation of public transport. In particular, we're going to see what lessons can be learned from around the world, specifically today from Toronto in Canada, by welcoming Kirsten Watson, Vice President of Government Relations and Transit Market Sector Leader at AECOM. Kirsten is former Deputy CEO at the Toronto Transit Commission and has just been chairing a fascinating series of conversations about the future of infrastructure at the Transforming Infrastructure Performance Summit in Toronto, the latest in a series of global summits hosted by the infrastructure software business Bentley Systems, which over the last couple of years I've had the pleasure of assisting them in the delivery. So why Toronto? Well, of course, the need for investment in infrastructure is a global challenge as we attempt to drive economies through the provision of better, more effective, lower carbon energy sources, housing, healthcare, water supplies and transport. And Toronto really understands this and has ambitious plans led by Infrastructure Ontario to invest over 185 billion Canadian dollars in the next 10 years as it builds new roads, transit and hospitals using public cash through the Canadian Infrastructure Bank to support further private capital. From the outset, Ontario has set out its ambition to harness the use of new technologies to both help deliver this ambitious agenda on time and on budget, but also to improve and transform the operation and maintenance of assets through the use of data, digital twins, and perhaps also through an array of artificial intelligence tools. It's a bold plan and one that perhaps the world might learn from. Well, and indeed, it must be said, Toronto is equally keen to learn from others. So let's hear more. Kirsten, welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast.
Thanks, Anthony. Very grateful to be here, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Excellent. Well, I tried, Kirsten, to make a decent case for Toronto's ambitions and experience. So am I right? Is the city and Infrastructure Ontario really pushing at the boundaries of what's possible in terms of investing in infrastructure, embracing technology to deliver better outcomes?
Oh, absolutely. It's a very, very ambitious program, particularly around the transit infrastructure, around LRTs, subway expansion, and so on. And it is an opportunity for us all as suppliers, as owners, those who are building, to absolutely embrace technology. I can speak specifically. We heard about it yesterday at the summit, where IO, Infrastructure Ontario, is going to be piloting digital twins on 3 of its biggest projects. So this is exciting times.
Brilliant. Well, I mentioned, and you just mentioned there, the input of Infrastructure Ontario to set the investment strategy and the role of the Canadian Infrastructure Bank perhaps to support that private sector investment. And I was really struck at the summit by the clarity of thinking and the consistency of the policies being driven by Infrastructure Ontario as they create the vital plans for new infrastructure and then, of course, how to deliver it. I mean, give us a quick sort of rundown on how it works. How does Infrastructure Ontario actually make that strategy? And, do you agree that it's the key to success?
Well, Infrastructure Ontario reports through to the Minister of Infrastructure, but it is very much leading the public procurement, consulting with the market, ensuring the delivery of these very, very large projects. And it's had tremendous success. And I think from AECOM's perspective and from the market's perspective, we appreciate the pipeline, the clarity around the pipeline. And we appreciate the consultation with the market to understand how should these projects be packaged? What is the right contract model that should be used? So really having Infrastructure Ontario as that body that can lead those discussions and lead for the province around this investment that's being made. It's invaluable, really.
Yeah. Well, as a Toronto resident,
yes,
and an infrastructure professional, what excites you about the city plans?
Oh, well, I mean, it's really going to be transformational. The subway extensions, long overdue. And I think we heard that yesterday as well, that, this city has not been building as it probably should have in the last couple of decades, but it's catch-up time. So we're going to see a tremendous expansion with the network. We're going to see, LRTs where LRTs have not existed in municipalities like Hamilton, which is going to be great. So, there's of course, there's the social infrastructure, the hospitals that are being built. We heard about the hospital up in James Bay that is really going to transform those communities and so on. So yes, it's great. It's going to be transformational.
Well, clearly, data analysis and data exploitation and the use of digital tools will form a major part of the transport of the future. I mean, where do you see the big wins?
So I see digital twins and other technology and the big data as the opportunity for us to all be much more efficient in our planning, much more nimble in our design changes, and much better able to consult with stakeholders in the community. If you can show people what things are going to look like and the impacts and understand the environmental impacts and so on, and have those conversations early, I just think it'll be much easier and it'll speed up the project, and it'll bring confidence to the entire investment.
I mean, your career before AECOM, as I mentioned, was Deputy CEO of the Toronto Transit Commission. Mm-hmm. So you know about running railways. And I don't know, for many good reasons, about safety, regulation, the transport sector is quite often quite reluctant to truly embrace this new technology. I mean, do you agree with that?
So, yes and no. I mean, I don't know if I support the premise or agree with the premise. I mean, I do agree with your point about railroads, and they've been around for a long, long time, and there's a way to run a railroad. Yeah. I do think, though, that railroads around the world and in Toronto as well are embracing technology to do it better. Yeah. Again, more efficiently, and I think of state of good repair, asset management. That kind of, the maintenance piece for sure. Yeah. So
how can we accelerate the use of it? Because there's an existing system in there. I mean, you're building new, and I suppose it's you can put it into the new system. But if you've got a legacy system, how do you get it in there? How do you accelerate the use of these new tools?
So that's a challenge for sure. You have a legacy railroad or a legacy system, and that's your constraint, right? You've purchased the trains, you've purchased the track, you've purchased the signaling system, and those interfaces and integration are already happening. But it's around the edges. So what are we doing to ensure, that the track is in a state of good repair? What kind of data and technology can we use to do that? What can we do around the assets and understanding the asset life and so on? And then, of course, there's the customer. Yeah. Right? All about the customer.
Well, how do you prioritize that? Because, they are two quite often opposing issues. Making the track more efficient to run, actually providing more services. How do you prioritize?
Well, I mean, I'm of the position that safety and maintenance come first, and that's perhaps a sort of an operator lens, but I'm also a customer, and I do appreciate, real-time data in terms of helping me inform my journey. But if you don't have the fundamentals, if you don't have the basics, which is a railroad that runs safely, efficiently, reliably, forget about the customer, right? Yeah. That is what the customer wants. So I do think that they complement each other, but, prioritization around if you've got really have to make sure the system runs reliably and safely.
Well, I love being able to arrive at an airport, as I did at Pearson, and walking straight to a train, and it's easy to find, it's easy to buy a ticket, and you get on it, and it takes you where you want to go. And that for me is, that is a kind of a measure of how successful it is. And so, well done, congratulations.
Yeah, the Up Express is a tremendous. That the success of that as well is that commuters are using it, not just airport customers, right? So it's just a really great.
But it's not easy. Good. It's not easy to do. I mean, what's the greatest obstacle, would you say, to bringing more innovation into the transport sector? Is it a culture, or is it just simply money?
Well, I think it's a bit of both. It's definitely money. I mean, there's not, operators are constrained in their funding, and that's, a universal issue, certainly across North America. So, the investments have to be made very purposefully, very intentionally, and informed. And I think the culture, it's a railroading culture, legacy thinking. You've got to bring those new ideas to the table, and of course, the culture needs to embrace it. So it's a bit of a struggle sometimes, but yeah.
And leadership, of course, is key.
Absolutely.
And I mentioned this clarity of thought, which really came across to me yesterday from Infrastructure Ontario. But where is the true leadership coming from when it comes to building these transit and modernising the transit systems here?
Yeah, I mean, I think the leadership comes from multiple levels. Of course, there's the political level. You need to have the political will, and you need to have the drive around the investment from the public purse. I think Infrastructure Ontario, obviously a very strong leader in making sure that the investments are spent wisely and that they're in the right place at the right time. But then there's the leadership on the local level, the organizational level, right?
Well, it's complex,
those are the people who are going to implement this stuff.
Yeah, it's complex. So the government's complex.
Yes, yes. And everyone needs to work together. It's the word collaboration. Of course, we hear it over and over again, but truly it is about partnership and collaboration. And people need to kind of be on the same page, frankly.
Which, of course, brings us to the summit. We'll just talk a bit about the summit that we were at together yesterday. It brought together a range of folk from across these
Yes,
different
it was great.
these different areas that we just talked about, who are all keen to transform delivery of infrastructure and embrace digital tools and really deliver better outcomes for the public. What really excited you about the discussion yesterday?
So I honestly, not just saying because I'm speaking to you, Anthony, but I really, really enjoyed the summit. And I've been to a lot of conferences, as we all have, but I do feel that the panelists were excellent. The speakers were excellent. They spoke with knowledge. And they engaged in a conversation, and there were a lot of leaders in the rooms to have that conversation. I felt very candid and open and transparent. So, hearing from the IO leadership, not only in the speech format, but also in the conversation format,
right.
Hearing about the great work that the Canadian Infrastructure Bank is doing around Indigenous relations and opening up, Indigenous communities to participate in the infrastructure market, which is, for us in Canada, it's very, very important.
Well, we'll talk a bit more about that a bit later on. But
Sorry, yeah.
No, but we covered a range of issues from policy setting to finance, digital barriers to community engagement. But we heard from politicians. So we heard from the Ontario Infrastructure Minister.
Yes.
We heard from the Deputy Mayor of Toronto. Do you think that politicians really understand the power of infrastructure?
Oh, yes. Yes, definitely. And I think we heard that loud and clear from Minister Surma. She's leading, as we talked about, a really ambitious plan, and she's all in. And you heard that yesterday in her remarks. And I think the conversations that the market is having with the minister and so on, she demonstrates a clear understanding of what has to be done and the difficulty in delivering. And she has a very talented team, of course, as well in Infrastructure Ontario to support. And then, of course, we heard from the Deputy Mayor, Jennifer McKelvey, who, my experience, is very hands-on. She understands the work. She's leading the infrastructure committee for the City of Toronto. And again, an ambitious plan that has really hands-on tackled resilience, particularly around the water issues that the City of Toronto is facing and will face. Yeah.
Well, as co-chair of the event, at the end of it, you summarise your key takeaways. What were your key takeaways? Yeah,
I had a few key takeaways. Lots throughout the day, of course, lots of great information. But I think one of the things that resonated throughout the day was focus on outcomes. That from a political lens, from a market lens, from an owner lens, it's all about outcomes. And those are the conversations we need to have. We saw with the Canadian Infrastructure Bank outcomes with respect to involvement with the Indigenous communities, which was a great example. We heard from the owners, which we've talked about, which is hearing from the City of Toronto, what they're doing, hearing from Steve Levine at Metrolinx and what he's doing in terms of delivering the rapid transit program or moving it to operations.
Well, Steve was very candid, actually, about the delivery of the light rapid transit, which, of course, there are some delays in that. It's causing quite a lot of angst in the city, and he was quite candid about the fact that it's not ready yet.
Yes. Yeah, I think, these big projects are hard. And absolutely we are facing some delays around one of our LRT projects, but it's going to come in. And I think that it's going to open and it's going to be amazing. And it's the outcomes. Yeah. It will deliver the outcomes when it opens.
Well, it was clear that what he was saying was when it opens, they want it to reopen and to be running
and to work.
Yeah.
Yes.
They don't want to open it and then it to fall over. Which, of course, is a good point to make a reference back to my podcast a couple of weeks ago with Paul Turner, Chief Executive of the Industrial Commissioning Association. The point you made very strongly there is we need to make sure that we're thinking about commissioning these projects before we actually start planning them. So a critical part.
And Steve said that too, right? That's really a strong focus of getting these lines open is making sure you're having a strong commissioning plan. And so when it comes into operation, it's flawless. Yeah.
Well, before we go any further, because there's a lot to talk about around delivering better infrastructure and better transportation infrastructure. But let's find out a bit more about you, Kirsten, because you joined AECOM a couple of years ago as a vice president, as I say, of the transit market sector leader. But you joined after a 25-year plus career in the public sector. So how was the transition from public to private?
Not quite 25 years, but it does feel like that some days. But yes, so I worked at the Toronto Transit Commission for 19 years. I also had a stint at the Ontario government for a while. And so the transition has been, I'm not going to lie, it's a different world, right? The private sector versus the public sector, it's a different world. And I think coming into the infrastructure space has also been a learning curve for me because I was on the operations maintenance people side of things, and now I'm on the infrastructure side. So, but it is tremendously exciting, and it's also tremendous to see how it all comes together.
Yeah.
Right. To deliver those outcomes. So it's been great.
What is your current role? How do you describe your current role at AECOM?
Yeah. So I think really what I bring to AECOM and around the transit market sector is, first of all, knowledge of the industry and the players and what their problems are, and being able to provide clarity within AECOM around interpreting what some of those problems are, understanding the client, understanding how the client has some challenges, and helping that way. And then also, bringing what AECOM has to offer back to the clients, whether this is around data, whether it's around design, architecture, engineering, commissioning. What are those things that we can help the clients with? And is
that solely focused in the Canadian market, or do you have a global role as well?
Yeah, I work with the global team as well. We have a very strong global presence, as you know. And so helping out some of the American agencies as well. And dabbling around around Europe as well.
Well, before AECOM, you were Deputy Chief Executive at the TTC. What were the memorable challenges that you had in that role then? Because there must have been a few. I mean, running a railway, and a city railway must have had some excitement.
Well, I mean, every day was a challenge, of course. There's always something going on. A very large organization moving, 1 million people a day. So it's, one of the biggest challenges, and you probably hear that from other people that you speak to, is managing transit during COVID.
Yeah.
That drop in ridership, having to be nimble around where you were putting riders, putting all the safety protocols in place, and of course the unknowns around COVID. That was very, very challenging. And then on top of that, we endured a cyber attack, which, you don't think about transit in a cyber attack. So we had that as well, which we survived quite well. TTC has a very strong IT team, which was really kicked in. And then there's, we have issues around the state of good repair. We have issues around crowding. And you have to be nimble and use your planning and rely on your team, both back at the shop, the planners and so on, and also the people in the field, to really manage the day-to-day. Yeah, and I presume there's quite a lot of interaction with politicians. Yes. As well as interaction with the public. Yeah, so the TTC has a board, of course, and it's made up of city councillors plus some private sector members. And, transit is a hot topic, as it is in most cities. It's often, first thing in the media, depending what's going on. Well, everyone's interested. And everyone has a view. And I think that it's fantastic that people own it. Yes. Well, everyone's got a view. Everyone's an expert. Yes. Yes. Well, you're a lawyer by background, and you started working as a labour and employment lawyer. That was with Norton Rose. Yeah. So we had quite a lot of discussion yesterday around building careers and actually managing people in the infrastructure sector. Are we getting better at career management and leadership management nowadays? I think it ebbs and flows, to be honest. I feel, I think the conversation yesterday at the summit was very good and very helpful and very focused, that we need to be intentional. We do need to bring young leaders and these people with these skill sets that we desperately need, particularly around technology and data and innovation. We need to attract them to our industry. Yeah. And that has to be intentional. And we have to describe that we're doing great things. We're building communities. We are, you want to be part of something big, come work in the infrastructure space, right? But then I think as helping people progress through their career, again, intentional, providing opportunities. There's so much. Yeah. And we just really need to be thoughtful. And more inclusive. That came strongly, very strongly yesterday. Yes. Yeah. I think everyone needs to look around the rooms that they're in and say, okay, do we feel that this is an inclusive room? Have we got the right people at the table? And if not, why not? Yeah. And what are we going to do about it? Mm-hmm. You live and work in Toronto, as I said earlier. It's a beautiful part of the world, of course. What do you get up to then when you're not thinking about transport technology and maybe even a bit of dispute avoidance? I used to do a bit of that as well. But Yeah, no, I love Toronto. I mean, it has its moments, of course, like any city. But I've lived here a very long time. I've chose to live here. I grew up in a rural community outside of Toronto, and I moved to the big city. And this is where I've raised my family. And so really what we do is take advantage of Toronto, and our thing is the water.
Right.
We have a sailboat, we sail, we take advantage of the waterfront and all that Lake Ontario has to offer.
Right.
And that is what we do.
Fantastic. Well, now I know you do a lot of sailing down there. I'll be back. I'll be back for sure. Moving on to more issues that we discussed yesterday. The UK, in many ways, led the world down the PFI route for delivering infrastructure. And after 25 years, we've certainly learned an awful lot about the service delivery that's created, to the extent that we're not doing it at all at the moment. It's been kind of banished in many cases. But Canada is still a very popular form of delivery, and it is delivering quite a lot of infrastructure through that route. So what has Canada done that the UK and perhaps other parts of the world have missed in terms of delivering those PPPs, those partnerships which are creating infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, it's like learning from other jurisdictions, learning from Australia, learning from the UK, and bringing those lessons back. And I think we also heard yesterday from Infrastructure Ontario being very purposeful, where you use a P3 and you set it up for success. And I think what we are seeing in the Canadian market is that P3s aren't the answer to everything, and alliances aren't the answer to everything. And so I think it's trying to say, what is the right model for this project to achieve the outcomes?
Right.
And I think it is about really being thoughtful and not assuming that one model is going to solve all of the problems. And certainly our P3s have been challenging as other jurisdictions. And so, live and learn and tweak as you go along.
And not necessarily just focus on the financing. It's about... Yes.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's the piece too. And we had that conversation yesterday as well. Is if you just focus on the money and the financing, you're missing the advantage that the P3 can deliver around, operations and maintenance and the whole deal.
Yeah.
And again, thinking about what is that package that needs to be put to the market? Can the market deliver in that contract model? And I think listening to the market, getting that feedback from the market, what will work and what won't.
Yeah. I mean, we heard a great deal at the summit about the way that the Canadian Infrastructure Bank is helping to drive that and is being supported by that clarity from government via the Infrastructure Ontario. I mean, is that the critical bit? Is it that clarity of thought and that consistency?
Well, I think the Canadian Infrastructure Bank is, very targeted in what it's trying to do to meet the objectives of the federal government. And, they talked a lot about broadband as a utility and opening up communities. We know about the investments around the Indigenous communities. So they are very, very purposeful and very targeted in where they are trying to provide that equity and bring people in. So filling that gap, really.
Let's talk about the investment in the Indigenous communities, because it's one of the key areas of partnership that was talked about.
Yes.
It's around really using infrastructure development to invest in those unrepresented and largely left behind communities. Why is that so important, and how would you describe the progress that's being made?
So, for Canada, we have an obligation around truth and reconciliation and the Indigenous people. And so part of what the Canadian Infrastructure Bank is doing is along the path of truth and reconciliation. And it is enabling communities to be to benefit from the infrastructure, to be part of it. This isn't a top-down, this is a partnership, and it's a collaboration with communities. And what does the community need, and what are the benefits that the community needs? And it's having those conversations. It's not, a funder saying, you shall do this. It's let's talk.
Yeah.
What do you want? What do you want to be a part of? And how do you want to be? Do you want to be on the board?
Yeah.
Right? And so on.
So what came across yesterday was it's moved way beyond being a box ticking exercise.
Absolutely.
It's no longer a charitable act. It's part of actually creating better outcomes for all.
Yeah. And it's happening, probably not at the pace it should be happening, and we all know that. But I think that strong partnerships are happening.
Right. Talking more widely, I mean, how do you see the private sector really helping to accelerate the transformation of public transportation and, of course, the infrastructure that it all relies on?
Yeah, I mean, I think the private sector brings tremendous value, obviously, to the conversation, and they bring the innovation. They have the like a company like AECOM with the global best practices, and all of that can be brought to the public sector again in collaboration and partnership to deliver what's needed. And so, yeah, I think that the public sector can't do it alone, and I really do feel that the private sector brings that innovation, ambition, and ideas to the table.
But in many cases, it relies on the public sector owners, whether
Yeah.
it's TTC or whether it's Infrastructure Ontario. It relies on them setting up long-term contracts that are flexible, that allow the private sector to embrace technology and embrace technology as it changes.
Yes.
I mean, how do you do that? Because if procurement is, particularly in public transit authorities, it's just difficult to make that flexibility happen.
Yeah, so I think sometimes we think a little bit too rigidly that procurement is the way to have the relationship with the public agencies and to inform. I think really what it is have those conversations early, consult and so on, and actually help to inform the procurement.
Yeah.
Right? The private sector can inform and help to say, this is what you need to think about in your procurement if you want X.
Yeah, because one of the things which we keep hearing about, and let's talk about whether it's a reality, the increasing use of data, but also AI technology.
Yes.
It's looming. So to what extent do you think that this technology and machine learning's ability to really understand data is going to transform?
I think first of all, it's happening.
Right.
People are embracing it, and people are learning how to use it. And of course, AI is data in, data out, in the sense it's the quality of what you're trying to do. I think that's a journey, but it's coming, it's happening. And I really feel that if we can embrace this and focus it, it's going to only benefit us all. Yeah. And I look forward to it.
Any pitfalls? Any things that are keeping you awake at night?
I do think the quality of the data is going to be a significant challenge. Who owns the data? How does the data get into what we're trying to do? So I think that's going to be a challenge. And then, of course, AI at this point can't really contextualize the output. So I still feel that, that is... And I don't know if we want it to do that, to be honest with you. But, we want it to crunch the data, do the machine learning. But I think we still want to be able to say, okay, is this fit for purpose for what we're trying to do?
Well, one of the things that AI is touted as being key to is a skills replacement tool, perhaps, or a skills supplementary tool. Yeah. I mean, but skills remain a challenge, not least when it comes to careers and infrastructure. We heard about that yesterday at the summit. Your background is, as I said, is in building and shaping leadership teams. What do you see changing in the way that we're building those teams and the skills that are available?
So I don't think that AI is going to replace people. I think AI is a tool. I think, what you're asking AI to do around, you wouldn't even use people to do necessarily, right? I think that you're taking a bunch of data and crunching it and pulling it out. Are you going to use 100 people to do that? I'm not sure. Right? I just feel that it's not a equivalency. So I think people are still needed. You still have to have policy. You still have to contextualize. You still have to plan. You still have to take that data and make it do something. Yeah. So I'm not really worried about it. Maybe I'm wrong.
No. But we do need to have the brightest young minds coming into the sector. How do we do that? Because there's a lot of other careers that they can get stuck into rather than running railways.
Yes, no, we have to. I agree. And I think that we're all competing for talent. Every industry is competing for talent. Every sector is competing for talent. And these bright young minds, I mean, you've met some of these young people and wow, launching rockets off their desks kind of stuff. But so we have to, as an infrastructure, is explain what they can contribute to.
Yeah.
Again, transforming communities, building big things, pointing to something with your kids and say, I did that.
Yeah.
Can you do that in a bank? I don't know. But you definitely can do it when you're building LRT and bridges and so on.
Well, finally, just to round us out, we're talking about Toronto, and it's a city you love and you live in, and you're passionately behind changing this city and making it better. What has to happen then to really accelerate the required change that you want as an infrastructure professional and you want as a resident?
I honestly think that let's just keep going. We have a great plan in place. The investment is there. The planning is there. Let's keep going. Toronto, we talked about, has stalled around infrastructure at some points in its history. We just need to keep going because it will be transformational. It's going to continue to benefit us as a community. It's going to open up neighborhoods in our city. We just got to keep going.
Fantastic. Well, Kirsten, really great to talk to you about this. It's a fascinating topic. And thanks for hosting me in Toronto. What a fantastic city. I'll be back to do some more sailing, I'm sure, I hope. But thanks very much for sharing your thoughts on the Infrastructure Podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kirsten. Sadly, though, that's all we've got time for today, but we will hear more on the Infrastructure Podcast in the pipeline and more guests to talk to as we continue to probe the big issues faced across the sector. If you haven't done so already, do check out the Infrastructure Podcast website. That's www.infrastructure-podcast.com, where you will find background and links to some of the issues discussed today, but also the latest podcasts to listen to and share with colleagues. So thanks for joining us. Thanks again to Kirsten. I look forward to seeing you again very soon.